Retired Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire. Let's get some more perspective now on what you just heard. My next guest was Canada's ambassador to Sudan during what he describes as a period of hope. Adrian Norfolk went to Sudan as Canada's envoy in 2018. He was named this country's first resident ambassador to Sudan in 2020. Mr. Norfolk is with us live. Hello, good to meet you, and thank you very much for making time for us.
Yeah, good to meet you too. Thank you.
General Dallaire there referenced a period in 2019, I believe he said, after the agreement was signed, in which there was, as I think you share, a period of hope, right? There was a feeling of hope. Can you describe for us what that was like?
Well, it was compared to what was there previously. Of course, it was absolutely a great feeling of hope for the future. The Transitional Council, Sovereignty Council, with its large civilian component, was something that the international community was very, very keen to support, obviously particularly the civilian side. And so large investments were made. Indeed, the January announcement, January of 2020 announcement that Canada was upgrading its mission to ambassadorial level and was beginning to develop, to establish a development program in Sudan. We hadn't had a development program there for many, many years. More signs of our hope that this new move, this transition would succeed. And we continue together with the rest of the international community throughout 2020 and 2021 to step up our assistance in terms of hundreds of millions of dollars were pledged by European and Western countries through the World Bank for a massive cash transfer program called the Sudan Family Support Program, which was supposed to begin towards the end of 2020. But unfortunately, delays in the implementation of many of these projects resulted in sort of a lack of success in this transition, and eventually led to the generals deciding that they could do better, when in reality what they were really concerned about was that the transition was actually achieving a move towards civilian control. And when they saw that there was a danger of them losing their control over large segments of the economy, in terms of the industrial economy, agriculture, gold mining, that's when they decided to overturn the Transitional Council in a military coup in October of 21. And so all that hope that had been invested and over the intervening period was unfortunately for nothing at that point, as General Dallaire has alluded to in his presentation.
He also sort of imparted a sense of worry, I think, or conveyed a sense of worry about the greater risks in the region, and particularly with other areas in and around there that are kind of in a perilous state at the moment as well. Do you share that concern?
Absolutely, absolutely. It seems ironic now, but the reason that so many countries were ready to come forward with hundreds of millions of dollars, and we're talking about the UK, France, US, Germany, and Canada also providing its contribution to that transitional period, was because we saw the potential for Sudan to be a very stable foundation within that region. Its geopolitical location, its geographical location there is key to peace in the region. So everyone wanted it to succeed. And so now, with the end of that, and with this fighting that we're seeing ongoing now, of course, we have the reverse scenario, which is a nightmare situation where Sudan actually collapses. And then, yes, that will definitely have implications for the surrounding countries.
Do you feel with, and it's understandable, of course, that people are leaving, and in particular the diplomatic communities, but do you feel with the resulting vacuum, the challenge of countering what you just laid out is incredibly great?
Yes, but of course, although diplomats have left, they're in the region, they're physically in the region and can go back.
Yes.
As soon as there is some sort of ceasefire that really takes hold. And I think that is, in terms of the short-term hope, there is a hope that the two generals will realise that they're not going to win. One might gain the upper hand in Khartoum, might indeed result in the other sort of leaving the area, but the fighting will continue until there is an agreement between the two of them to come to some sort of peaceful arrangement in the interim. And at that point, there will be an influx of diplomats, representatives, envoys from the AU. As mentioned, they will take a lead, I'm sure. But certainly the US, UK, and probably ourselves as well, we'll all be back there at the table again, talking to, I hope this is the scenario, we'll be talking to one or both of these generals with a view to the next stage. Our problem is that we tried this back in 2019 with the civilian transitional council, the civilian military coalition in the transitional council, and of course that didn't work. And you know, we're seeing the results of that. So you know, there's a certain lack of trust going into this second or third or fourth time around, where we're trying to deal with these strong men who have so much control, of course, over the weapons, over the security forces, but also over the economy. And that relationship between, you know, the economy and their wealth, their hold over those industries, as I mentioned before, agricultural resources, gold mines and other mines, that is the sort of the core of the problem. And it was in order for Sudan to move ahead to any kind of democratic, stable future, there will need to be a privatization or a nationalization even of those resources to get that link between the economy and the military broken. And so, and this is of course the fear that they have, that they will lose their own source of wealth.
Right. I have to leave it there, Mr. Norfolk, but I do appreciate your analysis this evening. It's been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adrian Norfolk was Canada's first resident ambassador to Sudan.